Great ideas and businesses don't belong in boxes, and that's where we step in and feature them. Welcome to this exclusive podcast series by The Brief, where we take things out of the pod. Join us as we speak to visionary startup founders who are disrupting the market in their own way and bringing the changes that are here to stay.
Welcome to The Brief. This is your host, Sean. In this episode, we're going to challenge some stereotypes and some notions about companies and organizations that are probably incorrect. For instance, in India, the terms company and business are commonly used interchangeably. But a company is not really its business. The business aspect is more like what the company does. On the other hand, a company is probably like its founders or its teams, something that we commonly refer to as the culture of that company. But essentially, it would mean that a company is its people. Now, unfortunately, a lot of companies don't truly understand the significance of this. Particularly in the context of human capital, companies have pretty much been pursued and consequently perceived as entities that are employers that create employment. But yes, things are changing. Maybe it is an emulation or extension of company practices from more mature and developed economies. But there is an increasing awareness among companies towards the need and impact of paying attention to the people that make that company. Or more specifically, there is now increased attention being given to learning and development in organizations. And no, L&D and HR are not one and the same thing. In a world of Venn diagrams, there'd be two circles with probably some area of overlap, but that can largely be two exclusive functions. So today, we'll talk to the founders of a company that helps other organizations charter their L&D plans through leadership engagements, team building activities, and other such facilitator-led intervention programs. We have with us Arun Rao and Rakesh Balchandran from Focus You Engage. Listen on as they not only share their story as entrepreneurs, but also talk about the relevance of L&D in today's context with the remote working and COVID-19 impact on companies and businesses. Arun, Rakesh, thank you so much for taking out the time and joining me today. Given the current scenario, I really appreciate you all being here.
Thank you, Sean. It's been a pleasure always interacting.
So, are you guys presently on a work from home entirely, or have you all started offices with limited staff?
For us, I think it has been work from home permanently pretty much for the last few months. We started out by watching and waiting to see if the situation improves. But considering the nature of our work, it has been such that we really do not need to be in the office to conduct our business per se. So pretty much offices have been shut. I think the entire team has been working from home from, I think the 15th of March is when we went into lockdown and work from home.
Okay, so I'm going to get into detail in the current situation and what you guys are doing presently. But first, let's kind of do a little flashback to the time that you all started Focus You. Or for that matter, how you all met and actually came together to start this. What is your once upon a time story?
So, Sean, Rakesh and me, we were colleagues in HP. I used to head the business PCs category in HP, and Rakesh used to be the product manager for the business PC category. So we knew each other from those days. We worked together for, I think, 1.5 years over there before we actually I decided to leave HP and start something on my own.
And when you decided to start on your own, was it this idea that you already had in mind, or is it something that you experienced yourself?
Okay, so it was interesting, Sean. In those days, since I was heading the PC category, and PC category was the largest category for HP those days, all the people who are doing the training there, the whole training department used to report into me. So amongst all the other things I used to do while selling PCs and all that, this part of my work, when I used to run trainings myself, is something which I used to feel most alive in, really. So came a point in life when, you just feel that life is becoming very monotonous and becoming very daily, in a certain way. And which is when it just so happened that I got nominated for a certain training in Singapore, which was called as the Next Generation Leadership Training. It was a group of 3 of us who had gone to Singapore. And one of the trainings which was done over there for us during that period was done in an experiential format for us. And it was run by a company called Focus Adventure. I was thrilled with that whole experience of how they engaged all of us and the amount of fun we had, at the same time, the amount of learning which we had. So once the training got over, I got speaking to them. A few months later, when I finally took a decision of leaving HP, then the logical thing for me seemed to be to get in touch with these folks and go to Singapore and actually get a first-hand feel of actually being in a business like this. So that's exactly what I did. So I left HP in June 2009, and Rakesh joined Focus he left HP, I think, on end of 2009, and 2010 is when he joined Journey with me.
I'll probably just add on to that. I think the first time we had the conversation, I still remember Arun's talking about this, that there was a particular day when he used to go to office, he parked his car in the usual spot and he felt that, oh man, I can't do this anymore, And I think we met at one of the coffee shops outside office while I was still with HP. And we briefly discussed the idea. This was right about the time when he had actually left HP. And I used to remember thinking that that doesn't make sense. I've just moved into a new role. I'm doing quite well in my role. Why would I leave the flashy corporate life and then do something like this, which is completely unknown? And initially I said, I'll probably think about it and probably come back. And I honestly never thought that I would actually go back. Later is when we actually got together and fleshed out the plan a little bit more, that it sounded very, very exciting. And it sounded something which I'd probably regret if I didn't do it at that point in my career. And coincidentally, on the day I decided to put in my papers, a day before that is when I'd actually gotten an award for one of the product marketing things in HP. So it is kind of odd that you decide to leave the company right at that point. But by that point, I think I was really clear in my mind too. So that's been my part in the story.
That's very interesting. And when you all brought the idea to India, when you all started up, what was market acceptance like? And were there other businesses in this space?
I think the first few months for us were exciting and challenging. It was a bit scary because we had left really well-paying jobs, and thankfully, we keep joking that the foundation of a company is successful spouses. They still continue to be. But when we started off, I think there was a period when we literally didn't know how to actually get business, right? Because we started out assuming that, okay, we're from the tech industry, so it means that we'll get business very easily from companies like HP, which is our previous company, or the Microsofts and the Dells and all the other firms in that space. But the reality turned out to be very different. We found that doors which were open to us because of the strength of our visiting cards in a corporate life were not that easy to open anymore. And I think one of the principles that we still use today, which Arun and I keep telling the team too, is that for every day and for every week, we try to figure out, okay, what are the next 5 things to do for us to survive? What are the next 5 things which are priorities that we currently can control? One of those things was to make a list of probably as many people to whom we can write, friends, acquaintances, HR folks we knew, saying that, hey, listen, we have started this venture and we'd like to start a partnership with your company and get some training work done for you guys. That's really how it started. I think we wrote to probably around 500, if I remember right. And I think just 10 odd people wrote back to us. So probably the initial days, really, really tough. And I think more than ever grateful for that experience, because especially during these times, it kind of gives us the courage that, okay, we've been there before. And I think if we've passed through that, I think we can get through this as well.
And getting your first client out of that must have been really exciting. What was that like?
Oh, absolutely. I think the first client for us was HUL in that list. Coincidentally, HUL was one of the companies that we had written to as part of that LinkedIn campaign. And it happened to be a friend who we had been out of touch with for a long, long time. And interestingly, the message on LinkedIn reached her on the day that she was quitting HUL. So pretty much literally the last official duty that she did was to forward that note, and she asked us in an email, to one of her colleagues in HR. And that colleague did call us for an engagement later. While we were very nervous about it because of our lack of experience, I think we did manage to kind of win that deal. I think I still remember that feeling. I think it was a definite high.
And what are the kind of challenges that you all faced in the conversations that you all were having then?
There were 2 kinds of challenges. The first was, of course, this whole question about our credibility. While we came from good roles in the previous company which we worked in, we had never ourselves been trainers per se. Like both of us actually come from a business background. When we used to go and talk to customers, one of the questions which used to come to us used to be this, in terms of saying, where have you guys done something like this before? And we actually had to tell them that try us out once and just see how it goes. That's the way we used to kind of try to convince customers. So this was one of the challenges in terms of proving our credibility in some sort of way. The other challenge we had was purely in terms of how do we price this, because we had no clue in terms of where should we start. So we spoke to a lot of our friends and people whom we knew in HR and tried to arrive at some kind of price points which we should be quoting. But we really didn't get too much of an idea from that. So finally, it used to happen that when we finally managed to get even some inquiries, we used to say, okay, let's err on the higher side. So we used to quote significantly higher. And once we used to do that, the next time we call these clients, we never used to get a call. People never used to pick our phone calls up. And then we used to realize that, okay, something's wrong. So we used to, probably try and call them from some other number and then say, hey, no, don't keep the phone down. Can you just tell us what about our quotation you didn't like? And then people used to say, hey, are you mad? Look at the price you quoted. So we say, okay, so is that very high? What should we have quoted at? They would give us a figure and we used to always try and peg ourselves a little above those figures. And hence we had to find a way in terms of what is the sweet spot in terms of pricing ourselves. So the initial days, I remember these were the two big challenges we used to have.
And in these 10 years, I'm sure your challenges probably changed from one form to the other as you guys scaled up and grew as a business. But talking about challenges, given the current scenario of the entire COVID pandemic, the lockdowns, the recession, this is probably something that is the biggest thing that has happened to you all since you all have started. So what are the major challenges or the major issues that you all have been addressing in the past few months?
As you know, that ours was a business which thrived around getting people together. It thrived around congregating people, right? And we used to talk about words like team bonding and things like that. Even the learning part of our business, which was there, was all about running classroom-based sessions. So what COVID-19 basically did for us was the minute you said that there is no congregation which is allowed, the whole business model basically came to a standstill for us. Okay, business didn't just decrease, it came down to zero. So for us, yes, that was the biggest challenge. But I think the good thing what also happened is we probably started reading the signals in the market a little earlier than many other similar kind of companies probably took to read those signals. In fact, somewhere in early March is when we had signaled out to the team saying that we are probably going to be seeing a black swan kind of an event. And we might see a scenario where business just drops down to zero. And hence, we'll need to prepare in advance in terms of if this happens, what will we be doing? So well before March 24th, when the whole country went into a lockdown, we already had brainstormed in terms of saying that if the scenario happens, then what are the different routes which we will take to market? And the early days of the lockdown, I think from the time March 16th is when we declared work from home for everybody. From that time to say the next 1 month, the whole team worked absolutely furiously, harder than we have ever worked before, to actually put up a whole bouquet of offerings which is around virtual. We're not saying that that's kind of taken us completely to a very safe space, but at least it's given us hope. We've already started seeing business happening on each of the 5 different verticals that we have come out on virtual. And we're hopeful that this is only going to grow bigger as the days pass by.
So essentially, you all leveraged your core expertise of L&D and capability building for your own team. It's very interesting, actually. But tell me, this pivot that you all have made, largely from being an offline business to now dominantly working in the online space, this must have been Herculean, especially internally, as you said. How did you all work on those?
I think for us, two things. One, while it was a shift in terms of complete moving away from what we were so comfortable and used to doing and quite good at doing. I think the first part that we had to work on was mindset shift for not only us, but for the larger team as well. Because for us to be able to move the entire portfolio from being possible in the traditional instructor-led training format to the virtual platform, it meant that we would not be able to do it alone. And I think the fact that we had a bunch of people who were really optimistic, who really believe in the purpose of what we work for, I think really, really helped. And frankly, I'm very, very proud of the way in which the team actually took on the challenge, because I can't remember even a single call where people were crying or cribbing about, okay, what needs to be done. They were like, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and get it done. And that, I think, has been a tremendous motivation. We do have low days and high days and all of that, but there will always be moments when the team really makes you feel that, oh, wow, this is a journey that I'm definitely not wanting to miss out on. I think that's been a big plus too.
I definitely agree with that, because I think the opportunity that this entire situation has presented is tremendous. Because largely, if you look at it, businesses and teams have traditionally been cultivated for a physical workspace. Now operating in a remote manner has meant changes and challenges, be it engaging teams from an offline context now virtually, or just keeping the culture alive or innovating to come out ahead of the competition for a post-pandemic world. This is like that proverbial challenge being an opportunity. How big is this opportunity, according to you all?
I think very big, because when we initially started out and we organized ourselves into 5 verticals internally, we had anticipated that one of our traditional verticals like team building would actually be quite a small one, because we thought, okay, people are going to be working from home. Probably companies are not going to spend as much, but let's anyway get our offerings ready so that in case the market picks up, we'll at least be ready to go. We've been pleasantly surprised that that is not the case. It suddenly meant that organizations had to contend with keeping morale and engagement high for a group of people who've probably not been used to working from home in social isolation. So while everyone talks of social distancing, it's actually physical distancing, and sometimes I probably don't like the term social distancing as much, because you're actually trying to put physical distance between people, but social distancing is actually putting literally social isolation, like you said at the beginning. So that opportunity actually started getting bigger because organizations started realizing that if they don't do enough for team engagement for virtual teams, it's going to impact productivity. And I think we saw some really good early signs, which was an opportunity again, like you said, a challenge becoming an opportunity. When we started getting requests for programs like these from countries outside India, because our business predominantly earlier was mostly India and a bit of South Asia. But then we started getting a few requests from the Middle East, and we are seeing opportunities from other countries pop up as well.
That must be exciting with looking at overseas as an opportunity now.
Absolutely.
Just wanted to add one point to this, Sean, which is, when this whole lockdown happened, just the way it was a big shock for a lot of people, I think it was also a big shock for a lot of companies. So a lot of L&D teams with whom we were talking to also initially were in a state almost of denial. So where people used to say, we will not do virtual right now, so let's just wait for this thing to blow over and then we will do, our normal workshops. Now, with time passing, I think this reality that this is not just going to blow over in 1 month or 2 months, I think that has sunk in. And so the complete learning agenda, which was in a way in a bit of a limbo for a month or two, companies are now beginning to actually look at it actively and say, okay, we have to do it. We have to train our people. We have to have these L&D engagements. But how do we do it? So a few of the companies like ours are able to kind of go back to clients with solutions, with ways of doing it and different ways of doing it. And that's where I think the opportunity really is.
And to add on to what Arun said, I think it's interesting to note that a lot of people predicted that L&D would be probably a sidekick in the current crisis, right? That people would be typically looking at operations to cut costs and finance and all of that. But we have heard from quite a few clients that organizations are looking at L&D to step up and take on and champion causes like employee engagement in addition to learning. And that means that L&D has also had to kind of pivot a little bit more and focus more efforts on areas that they were not comfortable with. But in no way has there been a sense that L&D is losing its relevance or a function. If anything, I think it has gone up in the last few months.
So, in fact, it's something that I wanted to discuss right now with you all in the sense that this is a concern, right? Cash flow is a concern across the board, across companies, industries, companies of varying scales. And it's not just about the lack of or the stifling cash flows, but also the fact that even if it's there, they're going to protect it. And general consensus of what people think is that L&D doesn't really top that as a priority, unfortunately, if I may add. So as a business, have you all changed the strategy or approach that you all have adopted in keeping your clients on board, retaining them, engaging them?
I'll actually go back to your question. See, this assumption that L&D is getting sidelined in some way is actually not true. For example, we did 2 digital roundtables where we got 15 odd L&D folks from different companies across the country for a discussion where we talked about L&D, the role of L&D, how in each of their companies L&D is being perceived in this time. And as Rakesh just said, it is more as if L&D has taken a center stage right now. So the exact line we heard from people where L&D used to be largely a push function earlier, and now it's become a pull function. People are approaching L&D for different things. But yes, I get your point that what has happened is people have become more careful with their spends. So like one of our participants in one of the digital roundtables told us, it just means that every single rupee or dollar which is spent on learning is being eyeballed very, very closely. It doesn't mean that L&D itself is taking a back seat or anything at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think the cash flow bit, I think also is crucial, because I think we, from our experience of trying to run this business, also have realized the importance of that. So while organizations are careful about cash flow, I think the way you approach your strategy in terms of which verticals to focus on or which are the areas to focus on, which customers to retain, I think now everybody looks at everything with a much more minute microscope than before. And frankly, it has been a bit saddening to see some of the news across the market to see that many organizations which claim to be, say, even people centric, seem to be taking decisions which are probably not in line with what is written possibly in their corporate culture and values and all of that. I think that's one thing which I think both of us were equally clear on in the beginning, that if we are to get through, I think we'll get through this together and we will do whatever is necessary. Once clarity was there, I think decision making regarding cash flow, which are the verticals to focus, what are the spends to be made, I think became much, much easier for us.
I like the aspect that both of you all mentioned about how, I mean, it's not the fact that L&D is sidelined, but it's just how it is now being perceived or the lens through which it is being looked at and its efficacy as a function. In fact, it brings me to this other bit related to an outcome of the entire COVID related lockdown and the work from home scenario. Something that is now picked up momentum in the sense of being upskilling. What probably started off as white collars who now had more time available on their hands were using this to learn new skills to come out ahead from a competitive advantage point of view. This has now kind of become the norm. For them to exit the pandemic and to come back to the normal world, so to say, not having upskilled is probably something that will not be viewed very positively. So this trend, has this influenced also how companies are making efforts to either upskill their employees? And is it something that is working in favor for a business such as yours?
I think so. What we've heard from companies is that, like Arun said, it is more of a pull right now than a push. We hear many instances of business leaders going back to L&D and not the other way around to say that, hey, listen, my folks are at home. Can we do a learning program for them? And from a data perspective, I think when we work with partners who make online simulations or micro learning content, the time that participants are spending on uptake of content seems to be increasing, probably because of the fact that one, they have more time for learning. And two, I think organizations also have more time to focus on these things. We are also, secondly, seeing a lot of involvement from business leaders in ensuring that learning also becomes a way of engaging people. So, definitely, the upskilling bit is there. Having said that, a caveat I'll add is that one of the things that we need to watch out for when we all look at upskilling and picking up new skills during this time is that this is a pandemic, it is not a productivity contest. Right. So sometimes you've also seen the other instance where people are actually taking a lot of stress by trying to do too many things at the same time. So I guess it's a bit of a balance of both.
Just to add, Sean, probably in human civilization, there perhaps has never been a time when more free content for upskilling has ever been available. You look at all the Coursera's of the world and the Harvards and the different universities who offer online education. A lot of them are offering it free right now. So if you want to upskill, I think this is the time for you to do it, really.
You know, one of the things that you have just mentioned, I think is a very important topic, and we definitely should be talking about, especially given the current scenario, and that's the kind of stress that has been building up. People entered the lockdown excited about the amount of time that they would have. And I think they did not expect for it to kind of go on for so long with so many months, and also a certain amount of uncertainty of when we're getting out of this. The social distancing, like we discussed earlier, has literally entered the space of what is social isolation. And it's a good thing that now people are at least talking about mental well being. Some companies are taking this seriously. So, as a company yourselves, what are you all doing to, one, kind of keep your own teams engaged? And two, with respect to your clients, to your companies that you all cater to, what is as an offering that you all are developing or helping as a solution for them?
Very relevant point today, Sean. I think mental well-being probably has taken up more importance in today's world than ever before. I think it's one of the focus areas for us as a firm, probably slightly early, and both Arun and I have seen the challenges that mental well-being can create in our own families. That I think has made us a bit more cautious than even before about how do we ensure that the mental well-being does not get impacted too much due to this. A few of the steps that have worked well for us. One is to constantly communicate to ensure that people watch out for the warning signs. Just to give you an example, we have a weekly call where the entire team gets together for an hour. It's a business call. We mostly spend time talking about the business and numbers and all of that. But yesterday, we took around half of the time in the call to speak about well being, the challenges that people are going through, and more importantly, how to seek help for them in case you actually run into such challenges. The other policy that we started a few months back to encourage people to seek help is to reimburse them any therapy costs that they have in case they do seek professional help. They're also actively encouraged to keep talking to people internally. And one of the good things that we've seen in the team is that there are quite a few people in our team who are amazing listeners. And in general, team members gravitate towards sharing openly as part of the culture that we have. One of our clients gave us a fantastic idea about giving a subscription to a wellness app. We've started offering that for the team members to kind of get it reimbursed as part of the mental well-being initiative. We've also started parallelly to develop offerings on the space. We've always had things around the lines of well-being and holistic wellness. But in the last few months, I've added quite a few, which range from something around using holistic wellness, which includes the body, the mind, the soul, everything, to even using art. So we use the creative form of mandala to kind of talk about centering and mindfulness and all of that too. So quite a bit of exciting work happening in that space too.
I think this is not just as a critical time for people to openly talk about it, but also for companies to take actionable steps to live the culture that they talk about. Okay, so I'm going to ask you all this, and knowing very well that it is a difficult thing to talk about given the uncertainty about it, but because y'all are working in this space. So, what do y'all think in terms of how much of this is going to stay? One, where we talk about companies and the additional efforts that they're now taking, at least given the current scenario with respect to L&D and their organizational development of their workforce. And two, y'all as a business, the current pivot strategy that y'all are on, how much of this is going to stay in the mid or long term?
I'll give it a shot, Sean. The way we read the situation right now, I think it's going to be a while before we can probably come back to what was business as usual. And even when we come to that stage, I don't think it will exactly be what it was in February of 2020. No, I think we will move to a hybrid model because a lot of companies who are now trying out virtual learning are now realizing that, look, it works. People are getting engaged. You can save a lot of costs by doing something like this. It is effective enough. So why not stay with that? So I don't see the face-to-face or the physical workshops completely disappearing per se, but there is going to be a hybrid thing which will evolve where a certain percentage of the trainings which we used to do will stay at virtual, and some of it will be the physical workshops. Now, the other implication for organizations also is this, that if this is going to be going on for some time, and when I say some time, I probably see this going on at least till this end of this financial year. It also means that for organizations, you have to be a little bit more wary about how you actually handle your people. One of the things which we keep telling our people is it is not a 100-meter dash, it is a marathon, which means that we are that much more sensitive about a few things like, how hard our people work also. Because if you ask anybody right now, they'll probably tell you that they're working harder than they were ever were in the previous pre-COVID kind of a world. So a couple of things which we have been doing even there is, for example, telling our people that one day in a month, we give them as a compulsory off, which is over and above every other holiday and stuff which they take. Recently, one of the communication which we sent to our team was saying that, whenever we are there on a video call, you don't necessarily need to keep that video on because you're hearing words like Zoom take and all that stuff. And these are very real issues which people are having right now. So to kind of sum it up, at least March 2021 is the kind of time frame which we see that this is going to kind of last. This is going to be a marathon and we need to work keeping that in mind.
Sure, I think to add to that, one of the things that we also are very conscious about is to ensure that we keep the mood and the atmosphere light. So, for example, we've kind of done away with pretty much our yearly planning rituals of saying we're going to grow at 40% or 50%. Between both Arun and me, I think the way we defined the objectives was to say that how do you ensure survival of our people and the organization till, say, the December of next year? But on the other side, we also kind of try to keep it light by saying that, hey, listen, we do not need to plan for more than a quarter. So the long run, which is essentially your 3-year plans and 5-year plans, I think pretty much have all gone out of the window. I would love to meet anybody who made a 5-year plan in 2015 and find out whether they managed to do that in 2020. So we try to keep it light too, but at the end of the day, I think it is important to ensure that we keep a balance, between ensuring that the team is motivated, the team is happy, and we're moving slowly in the right direction, like a marathon. It's not a 100-meter sprint where you can just relax after that.
I think I like this the most. The fact that business continuity matters, you focus on that, but you keep the culture alive. Because at the end of it, that's what an organization is, right? It's people.
Yeah, I think that part is missed by organizations. One of the things that we've noticed in communication from companies is that organizations which we have interacted with and are purpose led organizations have invariably handled communication, PR, well being better. Because for them, the purpose is a very strong rooted thing for guidance along with the values of the organization. On the other hand, organizations which have kind of not laid too much focus on that, their decisions do not seem to be as people oriented as the others. So I think keeping the culture alive is a tremendous galvanizing force in these times because you need your people to believe in the fact that, hey, we're in this together. One thing that Arun and I were very proud of yesterday is that we had the team call about well-being when somebody shared in the call that during such a time, I would rather be here than any other company in the world. And I think that made our day. That gives us motivation to go for much longer.
I think that your last statement does actually summarize what is the culture at your organization. Although it feels like we've just about started talking on the topic and we can go on for hours about this, we've literally gone over a half hour. So before you guys go, I'd love to kind of get a couple of closing notes from you all. As founders and leaders of a firm that's not only who understands the importance of investment of time and resources into the developments of its team, but someone who also does this. If you all had to give a message to fellow business owners and leaders, given the current context, what would it be?
For me, two things. I think one, very clear focus on people. If you take care of your people, I think they'll take care of the business part. Now, the second part of it also, which is to ensure that your fundamental business model is sound enough to stand no revenue for a year. That's been the biggest learning so far. If something like this happens ever again, are you prepared for it? This is something which nobody saw coming, which is fine. But at the end of the day, we should be able to take the learning from this and say that is my business model sustainable enough, at least to go beyond, say, a 12-month horizon? Because today, you see the news, I think 70% of startups in India do not have cash to last for more than 2 or 3 months. And that's scary. I think that will be my second input.
So if you ask me, Sean, one word that's very close to my heart is this word called compassion. Now, this is not a word that we generally use a lot in the corporate context. But for me, I think it's a word which is very, very relevant because being compassionate means that having empathy and doing something about it. It is not just about being empathetic, it's about doing something about that empathy which you have. So I think for leaders at this point in time, it's very, very important that we are compassionate towards the teams that you lead. Know that it's a tough time for everyone. Know that everybody is struggling. Know that everybody has this whole thing about a fear of probably losing their jobs. Everybody is struggling with even probably sleeping properly. So as leaders, the more compassionate you are, I think the more you will be able to lead with heart. That's what probably matters.
Thank you, guys. That was literally a message coming from people who live by the word that they say. I really appreciate you guys being here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Sean. Always a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you, Sean. Always a pleasure. I had a great time interacting with you again.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Out of the Pod. Be sure to check out all our other podcast episodes as we are now live on platforms like Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and Castbox. For more information, stay tuned to thebrief.co.in. Like, share, and subscribe is the usual drill, and this is The Brief, signing off.